What's up, y'all? Welcome to Tailgate Talk. This is my first go at something like this, but I've always wanted to try and envision myself doing it. So in admiration for people like Dave Waters, Ali Peak, David Soderquist, and none other than our illustrious founder that's allowing me to do this in all kinds of weather, Neil Schulman, who can forever call me a life coach from now on. I'm going to take my Twitter armchair coaching to an entirely different level. And I hope this won't flop as badly as the Giants did against the Cowboys on Sunday night, but we're going to cross our fingers with that. So I have three aims for this, and I expect you all to call me when I fall lower than the standard on this. My first goal is this is meant for fun. And when I say this, I mean life. So I don't take myself too seriously, and you shouldn't either. But feel free to send those nasty emails so I can share them with the world if you don't like what I'm trying to do here. Secondly, we're going to talk Gators mostly, but we're also going to talk about big picture college football issues and this crazy changing landscape that's just moving in front of us. I still am not looking forward to this barn burner of Rutgers versus Washington. Can't wait for that next year. But thirdly, I may drop a curse word here and there, but my aim is to make this as family friendly as possible. I've dreamed of doing something like this since I was 13 years old in my room back in the day where before podcasts and the internet, I had the newspaper and I had Jerry Green and George Diaz of the Orlando Sentinel. So I want kids to listen to this because sports are a pretty awesome thing to have in your life. And when the world seems crazy, sports tends to bring us all together. So that's my intention with this. And if I ever do get passionate and say a bad word, we definitely will put the explicit logo on here. But my goal is to make this family friendly for the entire Gator family and college football family that we have every year passionately going back and forth. And I promise there will be no F-bombs dropped on the show. My whole goal here is to make you feel like you're at a tailgate talking with a buddy. So think of it as a Margaritaville of football, if you will. R.I.P. Jimmy Buffett. So with that being said, I want to introduce you all to my first guest. Brad Shepard and I actually met through Twitter, appropriately enough, and I had taken exception to something he had written about Florida in an article on Bleacher Report. But then when I looked at his profile, I said, oh, this guy's a Braves fan, so he's not probably all too bad. So I definitely included a Braves compliment in my diatribe that I emailed to him afterwards. But we've kept talking after that, and we've been a really good sports friendship that's grown into a personal friendship, including when the Braves won the World Series in 2021. I think Brad and I almost put AT&T out of business that night with the amount of data that we were going back and forth with. So given that he was something of an inspiration for me over the years, I'm glad he's on the first show. So Brad, how's it going, buddy?
Man, I'm doing great, Casey. Thanks for having me on, and good luck to you in this endeavor. It's always fun to get started with something new. I mean, I've done a little podcasting in the past. Obviously, I have a face for radio, and I don't have a voice for radio, so that's not a very good combination. But everybody gets to look at my ugly mug and talk a little bit about Tennessee, Florida. So I appreciate you having me on.
Like I told you before we started, Brad was worried about a glare in the background. I said, if they're watching that for our faces, we're in trouble. So, so Brad, you're obviously a sports writer, but you're a Tennessee diehard. So as a fan, how are you feeling going into Saturday night under the lights at the Swamp?
Well, so I'll tell you, it's as a longtime Tennessee fan and a Tennessee grad, you never feel comfortable about this game. And that's just because, obviously I grew up watching the Spurrier Fulmer battles. I've been to several of those games, as I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later. Quite frankly, after watching that Utah game, I felt very good about Tennessee. I believe because, I took a lot of flack on Twitter, and rightfully so, because basically any time that you're a writer who is also a fan of a program, when you come out and say something like, I think Tennessee is going to win the national championship this year, you get tons of hatred from lots of other fan bases.
Well, and you're not a single digit follower guy either. So you're just
right.
a random guy saying that.
And lots of other flack from your own fan base that's like, what are you doing? What are you saying? So obviously I believed in Tennessee this year. That Austin Peay game has given me a lot of pause, and not because Tennessee overlooked an Austin Peay team because obviously of the big game this week, but because there were a lot of deep-rooted issues that I had been that obviously worst case scenario you're concerned about. So I will say this: I think Tennessee is going to win the football game, but there are a lot of concerns, and I will get into some of those too.
Yeah.
But I think that I really think that, especially with the game being in Gainesville, it's a lot more of a toss up. And quite frankly, if you're a Tennessee fan, you can never feel comfortable playing Florida.
I've often said that Florida is to Tennessee what LSU is to Florida. Just gets that voodoo magic, crazy good luck more often than not in the series. So I've often said I understand why Tennessee fans hate Florida. I get it. I totally understand it. And living in Atlanta, there were a lot more Tennessee fans up in Atlanta than there here are in Fort Lauderdale, where I live now. But yeah, it's a special rivalry. It's a really, really special rivalry. And I want to talk a little bit about this year's game, and then we'll go into, historical, because everybody has a Florida Tennessee story. So for UF fans who haven't watched Tennessee or haven't seen it, I didn't watch the Virginia game, and I was watching my own game when y'all played Austin Peay, and I just read about it. So what is new and who is new with Tennessee? Who are we introducing this year? Because I know your quarterback from last year is gone. Enter Joe Milton. So who's new and what's new with Tennessee?
So I'll tell you the reason why I was bullish on the Vols this year and winning and going a long way is because of three things that I believe have come to fruition, and one thing that has not yet. The three things that have come to fruition that I really believed would happen, and we're seeing it play out, is I think this running game is dynamic. I think that Tennessee's running game this year is better than it was last year, even with the same cast of characters, simply because I think that Jalen Wright has improved has changed his body. He's improved his game. Thankfully, he briefly entered the transfer portal and then came back. And we really kind of saw some flashes last year that even though Jabari Small was the kind of the starter of the bunch, that Jalen Wright's really the bell cow. And we've seen that this year. We saw Dylan Sampson score 4 touchdowns against Virginia. He's a sophomore that's gotten a lot of run. I mean, so there's really 3 guys in that backfield that are excellent players. And I thought that Tennessee was going to really do well running the football this year. The second thing is I believe that Tennessee learned under Coach Banks, the defensive coordinator, how to play defense last year in that Clemson game. The reason I say that is because, obviously you don't just step in year 2 and make up for a huge talent gap. Obviously, Tennessee does not have the horses on defense that coaches that have recruited for a full 4-year cycle has. But what they did in that Clemson game, and truthfully, Clemson played a freshman quarterback and had trouble scoring. I'm not an idiot. Like, I realize that happened. But one thing that they did was they really pressured the quarterback. They really got after Klubnik. They brought a lot of extra guys in the box, and they had a lot of success doing that. In doing that, the best player on Tennessee's entire football team, Aaron Beasley, the middle linebacker, was able to really show out and kind of shine and carry that team. So those are the 2 things that I think that we've seen this year. I mean, I think that that's really something that has carried Tennessee through the whole, through some struggles with the passing game. But the other thing that the reason why is because I didn't think the SEC was very good this year, and I think that's playing out as well. I think the SEC is much worse this year than they've been in the past decade as a whole.
Good call on that. I definitely agree with you on that one. And you didn't have to watch that. Who did Kentucky play this weekend? Eastern Kentucky?
Kentucky.
They struggled going into the fourth quarter. What in the?
Brutal. And Tennessee struggled with Austin Peay, quite frankly.
I wasn't going to rub that in, but, and Alabama obviously struggled with Texas. They've got their issues as well. And just as an aside, and we'll get back to Florida, Tennessee in a minute. What were your thoughts about Alabama's loss? I know, aside from you taking just joy and probably going in your backyard and doing mud angels, since it was raining the other night. What's is Bama done?
Well, a lot of Tennessee fans hate Florida. I mean, I grew up on the Tennessee and Alabama line. I'm a Bama hater. I mean, so this past decade and a half has been really difficult for me. I don't want to say that the dynasty's done, because anytime you recruit the way Bama recruited last year, I mean, there's legitimately 12 players in that class that could be anybody else's top player in their class. It just, that recruiting class was absolutely loaded. We're seeing it this year with guys like Caleb Downs at safety, Decaden Proctor at offensive line. I mean, there's just waves and waves of players there. But you don't replace Bryce Young. You just don't replace him. I mean, and so
I didn't see anything from him on Saturday night that was there was one good throw. But other than that, he was running for his life all over the place when he really didn't have to. He had the protection in the pocket. His strength is obviously running on the ground, but
I think what Milroe's problem is, or what Alabama's problem is what a lot of SEC teams' problem is, and that's the quarterback position. I think it's Tennessee's problem, and that's what I was kind of getting around to a while ago. I had a lot of faith in Joe Milton, but I mean, I think that at this point, there's a lot of questions. I mean, there's always been a lot of questions. You know, the talent's there, but you have a ton of questions about how does that translate into a game when live bullets are going. Milroe was the same way in that Alabama game. I would be very reluctant to say that the dynasty's over, but I think Bama's going to lose 3 games this year.
I think that's fair. I think that's an absolutely fair assessment. They've already lost one. I don't think you go into Death Valley and beat LSU. I don't think you do that.
I like Julian Sayin, who's coming in next year for Alabama, the 5-star quarterback. I think he's a stud. I think that he's exactly the kind of player that can put them back on the map because you know that they've got just incredible talent everywhere else. But they don't have the quarterback this year. And that's going to – and then next year you've got a freshman quarterback. So is he going to be the guy? You know, you could look at a couple of year down cycle here and, you know, quite frankly, you have to ask yourself, is Saban cut out at this point of his career to deal with 3 lost seasons? Or does he really see this as a challenge and kind of want to build them back? And
I mean, he's already going to go down as one of, if not the greatest. But if he can come back after losing 3 games this year and win a national title next year, I don't know if there's ever going to be anybody greater in the game than that. But that being said, bringing it back to the quarterback conversation, what do we need? What do Florida fans need to know about Joe Milton?
Well, I mean, kind of what you've seen the past couple of years of him actually. I mean, he's never had trouble winning the job. I mean, obviously his talent, skill set just jumps off the charts. There's been myriad stories on all major publications about him and just his physical attributes. I mean, you know, he won the job twice at Michigan. He actually beat out Hendon Hooker a couple of years ago and won the job at Tennessee. But when he gets in the game, you know, you see some struggles reading through the progressions. I have not personally seen that this year. The thing that I have seen that Joe Milton is struggling with is the timing aspect of things, hitting his receivers in stride, learning how to put touch on the football. Everybody calls him Bazooka Joe now.
Well, he's got a cannon for an arm.
Yeah, he does. He was overthrow Joe the first year at Tennessee, and we're seeing that a little bit again this year. So, I mean, I think you're seeing him, you know, in that Austin Peay game, there were probably, I counted 6 balls that could have been caught by the receivers, but that they were behind the receivers. So the timing aspect of it is off. And when you have that in a Josh Heupel coached offense,
I was going to say, in an up-tempo Heupel offense, that's a problem.
You know, it's absolutely a problem because for every time that you have a lot of success when you're running that hurry up offense to a T, when you're not running it so well, what it leads to is 3 and outs and your defense on the field a lot. And that's what we've seen the first couple of games that Tennessee's played. That's quite frankly, and there were 6 3 and outs in the Clemson, in the Orange Bowl last year too, that tend to get glossed over because Joe did have a good game. Tennessee did win that game handily, but there were some stalled drives. And so we're seeing a lot of that now. And so, you know, it's just a matter of Joe doesn't run the offense quite as clicky as Hendon Hooker did. And then honestly, a couple of things that you know, what I'm willing to give Tennessee a little grace on right now is a couple of the things that there's no real way of knowing because we've not seen it. And that's that the top player that dictates the tempo on that offense is Joe Milton. The number 2 player that dictates the tempo on that offense is the center, Cooper Mays. And Cooper's been out the first 2 games.
And Florida center was out last game.
Expecting to get him back in the Florida game. It's going to be a game time decision, but they think that he's going to play. If he plays, that changes the whole trajectory of that offense because the tempo has what essentially last year was around 85 plays a game has now dipped down to about 75 to 78. So that's going to, if Tennessee can see the uptick in those offensive plays go up, it means they're having success Joey Halsley is the new offensive coordinator, and he took over for Alex Golish, who's now South Florida's head coach. Losing him has been a big thing for Tennessee. So quite frankly, they don't have the offensive they have the offensive firepower, but you've seen drops and fumbles from receivers. You've seen throws behind the receivers from Joe. You've seen a little bit of the tempo that's dipped a little bit. So Tennessee is not quite clicking offensively like they were. But truthfully, it was this way last year too. That Pitt game, Tennessee didn't score until the very tail end of that first quarter, and then things started kind of going in the right direction. So they got off to a slow start last year. So if Tennessee gets those plays back up and gets that timing back down, I think you're going to see a different football team. All of the pieces are there, but when things are out of sync in a tempo-based offense, it gets ugly quickly, and that's what we've seen this year.
And the biggest concern from Florida's perspective is how long can the defense hold out? The offense cannot stall, and Florida can't come back. If they go down 17-0 at the start of the first quarter, I don't know if this offense could get us back to that point. So I think early and often stops would be Florida's key to the game.
You hit the nail on the head. In my opinion, the two biggest keys to this game is Florida keeping Tennessee from getting off to a quick start. Because if Tennessee gets off to a quick start, then they can settle down and kind of get into their tempo. They can do the things they want to do offensively and kind of a better job of play mixture than what I've seen so far. The second thing is that Florida and I've watched both games, and I've watched every play of both games leading up to this game that Florida has played. To me, Florida has done a lot of stacking the box. They've done a lot of getting after quarterbacks, and they want to probably try to do that against Milton just because they know that Milton could potentially get rattled. That's difficult to do with Tennessee, with the way Tennessee splits out receivers. What Tennessee has really exploited a lot during kind of the good times of the Heupel offense is when teams put a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks, they throw those quick outs, they get those splits, the receivers can find open spaces, and the quarterback can put the ball on them. So if Tennessee could exploit that, then I think that Tennessee would do well. If Tennessee struggles to exploit that, because I don't see Florida's mentality changing. If they get pressure on Milton and they put 7 in the box and try to stop the run and put it on Milton's shoulders to beat them, Tennessee's got the horses for that to happen, but they haven't seen the consistency to make it happen yet.
Well, and I think going even deeper into that point, we're going to load the box. Florida's going to load the box and dare Milton to throw it. But when you do that, you end up like the first play that Utah had against Florida and end up on a touchdown on the first play of the game. So there's a risk reward to that, but that's good to know about Tennessee, that Florida fans can look back and say, well, this is the guy that we need to be watching. How much do you think 20 years of walking out of the swamp on the wrong end of things factors into this game? And what I mean by that, for listeners who don't understand that point, Tennessee has not won in Gainesville since 2003. So I was a freshman in college at that point. So, we've seen a lot of streaks come to an end by Tennessee. So do you think that psychology affects the team or the coaching staff? Or, you alluded to it with fans, but how much does that play a factor on Saturday night?
I think it plays a huge factor. And I think you talk about, it's very easy to underplay the psychological aspect of things. But when players hit, and then you're like, oh, this is a new group of players, this is a new team, yada, yada, yada. When players hear that and they hear it from fans, they hear it from fellow students, and they know the history it's like Billy Napier said this week, talking about the rich history of Tennessee and Florida. Tennessee doesn't really want their players to know about the rich history of Tennessee and Florida, because in their lifetime, it hasn't really been pretty. So you try to just separate that a little bit. But psychologically, somebody asked me this week, what are you most scared about Florida? And I was thinking, I was like, looking at it from a personnel standpoint, from a schematic standpoint, nothing about Graham Mertz really scares you. Nothing about Florida's struggling offensive line really scares you. Obviously, I think they've got Pearsall as a stud, and you can count on him to catch the ball. Love Trey Wilson. I think he's one of the most dynamic freshmen in the country. Lots of guys that you look at, Florida's always going to have talent. Florida's always going to have athletes. That always find a way to get the ball in the hands of those guys, and they do something crazy against Tennessee, whether it's a backup or a third string quarterback or not. And the reason for that is when somebody asked me what I fear most about Florida, I said the helmets, the jerseys. I fear Florida. Just quite simply because the Murphy's Law aspect of football happens no matter when Tennessee plays Florida. And it's happened even last year as I'm sitting.
When we got that onside kick, I just looked at the Tennessee guy next to me. I'm like, here we go.
I looked at my dad. I was in the stands and I looked at my dad and I said, I just can't watch it. And I've never not watched a final play. But I'm like, I'm not watching the Hail Mary. Like, I'm just not watching it.
Well, I mean, it's not like you haven't seen it before.
You see that so much that I just, I paid that money to go to that game and then didn't watch the final play. Thankfully it worked out in Tennessee's favor, but there have been so many times where it hasn't.
I've got I got a dear friend down in Jacksonville, Don Johnson. So if you're listening, Don, I texted, I was at the 2017 game and, I was texting him like, here's to overtime. And he goes, stop it. You people always do this. And then the ball landed in Cleveland's hands the next play. And he said, I hate you people. I hate you people.
It's just
so that was cool to be there from a Florida fan's perspective. But sure. I got to ask, what's the worst loss to Florida that you've endured?
Man, there's been so many. I mean, and I wrote down all the, this used to be a game that I went to all the time. Honestly, over the years when when you get married and you change jobs and you do all these things and you have kids and those things really, you don't go as much as you used to, but I used to make it a point. So I was at the 95 game. My first experience was, I played a high school football game in 95 and my dad's like, why don't we go down to Gainesville? So we went down to Gainesville, drove basically all night, a couple buddies, went down there. We're high school kids. Now I'm a sophomore in high school. We're walking past fraternity row. I get my shirt ripped off after the game because I'm talking crap. And, but that was the 62-37 game. And so, you think, well, that's what an indoctrination to this series that is. So I go back in 97 with Peyton and, former forgets that or didn't realize that Jamal Lewis is on the sideline and it's a 33-20 game. So my greatest memory was my freshman year of college in 98 where they stormed the field. And I know that crushes your soul.
Oh, it does.
But, I was there. I mean, so the next year we thought, we've got it kicked. And so we traveled drive down to the swamp and Alex Brown has 7 sacks. And, and then was it Alex Brown? That was his name, right?
Yeah,
the defense.
Yeah, Alex Brown. Yeah, Alex Brown. And my first memory really of Florida, Tennessee was Joey Kent meeting Lawrence Wright. The ball thrown from Peyton. I mean, that would be first degree murder in football today. But man, that was a hit.
People don't realize, so at this point, I'm a sports writer, student paper, and in 2000, I'm standing literally on the 2-yard line for the garbage no catch from Gaffney. So I'm there having to endure that, and then worst case scenario, I get to go to the Florida locker room after that. Because then, I mean, honestly, like at that point, like I had the journalistic integrity thing going, right? I mean, so, you do kind of take it at its face value that as many kids that are crushed over here, you got these kids that are ecstatic over here. So there was that one. That was the heartbreak. And then, of course, the 9/11 postponement game. I'm sitting by a couple of my good Florida buddies in the press box, Andy Staples and Jeff Darlington, who have gone on for much better sports writing careers than me. But those guys, we're all there to watch the Travis Stevens game. And then since then, honestly, that was 2001. And I've been to 2 since. I was at the Jawan game, and then I was at the game last year. So I'm 2-0, or I'm 3-0 in my last 3. So
hey, you need. I've got a free ticket. You want to go to Gainesville this weekend? I got a free ticket for you.
So, I went from really struggling through. Oh, and I didn't tell you. And so the 95 game, I get my shirt ripped as a sophomore in high school by drunken fraternity guy. And then in 97, we get down there to get tickets, and we get to our seats, and about 80 people have the same tickets that we have. So we bought counterfeit tickets. So they're kicking people out of the game. And so we end up just like walking around the stadium. Like we did not want to get kicked out. So we left when we saw they were kicking people out. And we're like walking around trying to just sit in straight. There were no stray seats. So we're like trying to sit in strays, getting kicked out every time somebody comes back from their beer break, or not beer break, but their cokes and stuff, And it was a brutal game to not only have to endure the defeat, but to not really have a seat, to just kind of be, matriculating around the stadium, hoping that you find a place where nobody's going to kick you out. That was my first two Gainesville experiences were horrific.
I went up to Knoxville. Let's see, I've done 2011 2011 in Gainesville, 2013 in Gainesville. I went up to Knoxville for that barn burner in 2014. That what was it, 9-7 or 10-9?
Just invent ways to lose.
It was so cold. Oh my gosh! And then we put it in the backup, and the back floor. Tennessee was up 9-0, and this lady behind me is like, "I'm finally going to get to see the Gators lose in Neyland." And Florida comes back and, of course, wins 10-9. And this lady said, "I just." And something that's not appropriate for radio, but all the Florida fans held up 10 because it was 10 years in a row and Florida won with 10 points. So, and I went in 2020, went for the COVID game, another really cold one. But
it gets cold up there.
Yeah, it does. But I got to ask. So you said you were at the '98 Florida Tennessee game, and I'm assuming you were at the Alabama game last year. What was which was more wild?
So believe it or not, I had to work Bleacher Report last year and did not go to the Bama game. It's the great.
Man, they did you wrong.
Other than blowing the opportunity to go to the '98 championship game, missing the Bama game last year was the biggest soul crusher of my life.
I am sorry, as a fan for you. I am sorry that you had missed that.
It was not only that, but I didn't get. I mean, so I got to kind of enjoy it. But I had no faith leading up to the game, so I had to go out and buy my cigar on deadline. So thankfully, the Bleacher Report editor, Miss Paige Kuhn, was like, "Go get your cigar, we'll be good." And so I came back and then had to like completely clear my mind and write. So it was, and so now I do national college football for Bleacher Report now. So obviously that was a big part of my story, but it was not the only thing that I had to focus on. So it was extremely difficult to when I filed I'll never forget, I smoked half my cigar and then I was coughing up a black lung and decided I'd smoke the rest of it later. And so about, 1:30 a.m. when I filed my story, I'm still just jacked up and I'm like watching the game again. So I watched it and really kind of enjoyed it in the quiet of my, and celebrated again after that. But, I
sometimes really, you got to pull the Aaron Rodgers and just listen and shut out the world in a black, dark room, right?
So nothing will ever really beat the '98 Florida game, only because it was such a seminal moment for me. Because I was a freshman. We camped out for tickets, and it was like, it was this experience. So we're like sitting, we're there all night. We camp out. There's like a dude playing a guitar. It was like the perfect college like atmosphere. We get to the window, and it's just a random luck of the draw. We pull 50-yard line seats, 36 rows up. So, I mean, it's like we're watching it on it was just beautiful. I'm thinking this is the way it's always going to be as a student at Tennessee. You're always going to get these seats. Never got them again. But I was there. It was the perfect seat to watch the perfect game, to break the streak, and to be the catalyst for the title. And it was just, and celebrating all night, going down to the strip and, doing all things college kids do. And it was just such an experience that was such when I try to, so my son is 13 and he doesn't love sports the way I do. And he likes sports, like he'll watch games with me, but it's not just, he's not passionate about it like I am. And I wish that he could have just one of those moments that just like you look at it and you're like, this kind of transcends life right now. This is one of the most important experiences of my entire life, regardless of whatever. And it was truly one of those moments.
It's so true. And that perfectly leads into the next question I was going to have for you. The first moment that I remembered being a Gator, and for anybody listening that's been to a Florida game, and Brad, I'm not sure if you've ever heard it, but there's a video and it says, "What makes us rise?" And it talks about, when did you first learn the salute, right over left? and talking about what it means to be a Gator. And mine was Chris Doering in '93 against Kentucky. With Doering's got a touchdown, and the cute story with it. I was at my grandparents' house, and my grandma didn't want me to get into sports. And my grandfather bought like a little, for the kids that listen to this, they won't know, but it was a little portable TV. You remember those little portable TVs that you had? And they had a little handle on top, and they were black and white. But my grandfather had one with rabbit ears that you pulled out and everything. And he bought it and he put it back in my room. And after dinner, he and I, went back to the room and listened to Mick Hubert, the great Mick Hubert, who back then, you didn't have, ESPN 1, 2, 3,
Right.
and ESPN 438, to watch college football. So, the radio broadcast, it was on the Sunshine Network. And, when it landed, when Werfel threw that ball and it landed in his hands, Doering's got a touchdown. It was like, that was that seminal moment. That was that moment of passion that was like, I want this. So, with that in mind, and, it may be that 98 game, but what was yours? What was your moment when you became a Vol, or you became a sports fan?
That's a great question. And I've thought about that, and I've actually written about it a couple of times, because, at that point, I'm a college freshman, and there was never a doubt. It was really, when I decided I wanted to be a sports writer, it was either I wanted to go to North Carolina to write, or I wanted to go to Tennessee because I was a Tennessee guy. And so, I just chose Tennessee and kind of carved my own path as far like at that point, no student had ever. So I was a correspondent for the Chattanooga Times Free Press, and I was a correspondent to the Tennessean. Then Andy Staples for the Chattanooga paper, and then Chris Lowe with the Tennessean did an internship with the Tennessean, did an internship with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
So you major in English, or did you major in journalism or
majored in journalism?
Cool.
So did that, and like when I did the newspaper thing for several years after college, but at that point, like I knew I was already dyed in the wool. But for me, there's a couple of moments that I remember, and one of them is neither one of them is an actual moment like that. Neither one of them is a game moment. They're really more things I remember that really kind of morphed into me just loving it on my own. And so the first thing is my dad had an old VHS of the Sweet Taste of Sugar. It was the 1985. The 1980. So I remember.
Was that one of those old Coke bottles that you would put, and it had like all the scores on it?
He had one of those, but no, this was just there was so what it was Tennessee played in the Sugar Bowl in 1985 against Jimmy Johnson, Vinny Testaverde, Michael Irvin, the Blades brothers, and just the stud U, and absolutely the downturn to you. I remember watching that game, but I was 6. So this was like 1985, and it was January 86.
I was born in 85, and the game was 93, so I was around 7.
So this was 6 years old. So there was that VH. So essentially, leading up to that Sugar Bowl game, there was an hour-long show chronicling Tennessee's 1985 season, narrated by John Ward. So even though I remember watching the game, I don't remember watching that VHS. And buddy, I burned that VHS up like the whole next year. My whole 7 and 8 year old year, like I would sit in my room. I had my bed and then a little recliner, and up until I was in my teens, like I would watch The Sweet Taste of Sugar on VHS over and over again, and then watch Tennessee annihilate Miami 35-7 in the Sugar Bowl.
I don't like either team, but anytime Miami loses, it's a good day. It's a good day.
So that was. Nobody gave Tennessee any chance to win it that year. So watching that over and over again, the Dale Jones amazing interception against Alabama was just, that was step one. And then step two, it was really a player for me. Like, as much as I love Tennessee, and as much as I remember like the miracle at South Bend, I kind of watched those games recorded on VHS because I was playing football. So for me, the player was Heath Shuler. And when Heath Shuler really kind of broke out and he really kind of took Tennessee from Tennessee's a nice little SEC team to the early Fulmer years, and Tennessee's suddenly winning 10 or 11 games every year.
He went to New York. He didn't win the Heisman, but he went to New York, didn't he?
He did go to. I think he went to New York.
I think he was a candidate for the Heisman. I don't think he won.
I should know that and don't. But I
met him actually. He was a congressman in D.C. when I was interning up there, and nicest guy. It's funny. I had on a little gator pin that the congressman I was working was a gator, and so he walked by and he just went, ugh. And I said, I'm so sorry, and I knew who he was, but
Sure.
I got a picture with him. Just a really, really nice guy. He Schuler was good guy.
He's a good guy, and you know, and so like, but he was it for me, man. I mean, like once he kind of became like he personified Tennessee really becoming a national program. And then post Schuler, it transitioned. There was 1 year where it was Jerry Colquitt, Todd Helton, and then it transitioned into the Peyton era. So like there was really like a 9-year stretch there where it was just you had two of the greatest quarterbacks in the country and two of the legends of Tennessee football. So it was really the sweet taste of sugar and then the Heath Schuler era that really did it for me. And I remember, it's funny. I grew up in a small town in outside of Fayetteville, Tennessee, and Lincoln County, Tennessee, on the Tennessee-Alabama line, right about 30 miles north of Huntsville, Alabama.
I've driven through there many a time. I've driven through there.
And so Lincoln County's football team won 3 state championships growing up. So
I'll never forget.
I would wait. Do what now?
What position did you play?
I played center and defensive tackle.
Dang, man. Dang.
So
you're like what Stevens from Colorado, man. You're on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I did, but I ended up having to. I had to quit because I had a heart condition, which crushed me. But I remember growing up, and it was like I would wake up in the morning, and they were just incredible. And I would wake up, and they had a coach's coffee show where they would talk to the high school team. So you'd do the coach's coffee show at like 7 a.m. And then you would listen to Leonard's Losers, and then it would be like the Tennessee pregame show. And even if Tennessee was on television, like I would turn my little television on and listen to John Ward. And I'll just never forget it because it just it was like a Saturday ritual. It was like
and my Sunday was breakfast with the Gators. Mick Hubert would be on there and Spurrier, and you get Spurrier on there. Well, I don't know why number 11 ran this route when number 8 and 9 you'd be down the field. That was watching him, analyze the game. There's a funny story, where he pulled Danny Werfel out of the game after 2 or 3 interceptions, and Danny Werfel goes up to coach and says, I'm so sorry. And Spurrier looks over and says, don't apologize. Not your fault. It's me for putting you in there. So, it's
what a national treasure.
What sports can do. Steve Spurrier is a national. He totally is a national treasure. But it's so cool what sports can do, and that's kind of what I'm hoping the show does to at least humanize the other side.
Well, I'll never forget Sunday morning. People. It's just different these days. But on Sunday morning, we would wake up before church and we would drive like 45 minutes to Winchester, because at Winchester you could get a Nashville Tennessean newspaper and you could get a Chattanooga Times Free Press, and so like. I'll never forget, like you'd go buy the papers and I would just be so excited. Most kids are excited about the funny pages. And I'm like excited to see what Chris Lowe, what David Clymer, what Joe Biddle, what Mark Wiedmer, what those guys had to write about the Vols game.
Like I said, for me, it was George Diaz. It was Mike Bianchi. It was the late Jerry Green. He had a really cool article, really cool column series. It was called From the Cheap Seats.
And you relived it again on Sunday.
And you did. You totally relived it. And back when you didn't have a computer and you just got to watch it, you couldn't go online to rewatch it. You were at the mercy of ESPN or whenever it would be re-aired.
Absolutely.
That it was a special experience to be able to see a game twice.
It was.
So Brad, we're going to go into what we're going to call a flash round. And the flash round is going to be 5 words or less with no explanation to any question I ask for the next 5 questions. Okay. So it's going to be Tennessee, Florida related. It's going to be a little bit of everything related before I let you go back to your son's math tutor for the evening. Because, algebra, that's what we all need to know in 2023. So first question, Dion, for real or not for real?
I buy the hype.
Buy? Okay. You know what? This is the first show kink we're working up. Buy or sell. So Dion, you're buying Dion.
I'm buying him.
All right.
I like the talent level.
The Pac-12 having the most rated teams in the top 25. And at the end of the year, that will still be said. Buy or sell.
Best conference in the country this year.
Wow. That's a bold statement. Okay. Who are your top 3 Heisman candidates through week 2?
Michael Penix is who I picked. I'm going to roll with him right now because it goes against the grain. Shedeur Sanders and Caleb Williams, all three Pac-12 quarterbacks.
Man, Williams had a good night the other night, didn't he? I mean, that
Sure
kid's
did.
just
That was more than 5 words, but still.
Oh well, yeah, we'll make it. We'll make an excuse on that.
Right.
I'm going to make it tough on you. Realignment stops here. Buy or sell?
I'm going to sell. I think there's too much money to be made to not see a super conference.
It's just incredible to me that we're going to see Stanford play in the Atlantic Coast Conference. I mean, like I mentioned in the intro, Rutgers and Washington, this is something you want us to endure and watch.
College football, as we know it, is over. ACC stands for the All Coast Conference now.
They might have to actually change their name to that. I mean, I've always called them the almost competitive conference, but here.
Right.
Who is your pick for a national champion? It's a wide open year, so that's not an easy question.
So I hate to not say Tennessee at this point when I picked them, but I think
we'll say Tennessee's 1A. We'll say Tennessee's your 1A. Who are they playing in the national title?
I mean, I think Michigan comes out of the Big Ten.
Bold move, Cotton. Bold move.
I want to say Penn State because I really think that Penn State
they're sneaky good,
more talent than anybody else up there.
I mean, when they were down 7-0 and they just ran it up, what was it, 63-7? And I realized they were playing nobody, but they can do it with the arm. They can do it with the quarterback's legs. They can do it with the pass catching backs. And that's not even getting into their middle linebacker play.
So my buddy was Drew Aller's history teacher in Medina, Ohio. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for Drew. And I don't know Drew, but I mean, just out, it's that second degree of knowing him. So as much as I have always hated Penn State, like I kind of pull for them because I think they've got a lot of talent. I cannot stand James Franklin, but
well, I would imagine as a Tennessee fan, with him being a dandy, he
right.
didn't leave you with good memories.
That was a bad time. I would say Michigan at this point. That's
right.
Yeah.
Favorite spot in the SEC? Tailgate spot in the SEC.
I think if I had ever gone to LSU, I would say LSU because I've been to LSU, but never for a game. Man, Texas A&M fans are cultish, but they're so freaking cool. They're just the nicest people.
They thumbs up everywhere they go. I mean, just the nicest.
I felt weird because like they were just so nice. And then that was, even though Tennessee lost in overtime, it was a fun experience. I mean, and so I would say underrated Texas A&M. I wish I had better experiences at Florida, but I've had.
You're 2-0, so you're staying home. If I need to call your wife and make sure she ties you to a chair, you're staying home. But
I've had brutal experiences down there, and
and
when grown men bark at you, it's never a good thing,
right? Favorite drink and favorite food to have at a tailgate. Must have drink and food.
I don't really drink anymore. I used to drink.
Or what would you recommend then people to drink?
We'll
I don't drink either.
We'll say Diet Mountain Dew.
Well, mine is bubbly water. So bubbly sparkling water. That's my go-to nowadays. But what's your food choice?
Chicken wings. It's always chicken wings for me.
See, a pub sub for me.
No matter what kind.
Every time it's a pub sub for me. Pub sub for the win. But all right, nothing else left to do but the fat lady singing, and you give me your prediction for Saturday night.
Oh man, so I think I think the under looks tasty in that game. I do not see that game getting to 58.5 points. I think Tennessee runs the ball. I think Florida wants to slow things down. I think Tennessee really struggles at times in the game. But I think that we have not seen Tennessee yet break out and really stretch the field like we're going to see. So I would lean toward the Vols, and I'm going to say it's probably at this point I would say like 30 to 24. I think it's going to be an extremely close game. I think it's going to be another one of those nail biters. Every Florida Tennessee game that I've ever been to has been one. I'm not going to this one, but I think that all of the talk about Florida being down, obviously I think that they're more down than what we've seen, but Tennessee always has the struggles against Florida. So I think that game's going to be close. I do think the Vols win and kind of exercise the Gator demons a little bit down there, but it is by no way, shape, or form going to be easy.
I got Florida 28, Tennessee 24. So again, close. I mean, we're both close. So
I wouldn't balk at it either way. I mean, I'm certainly not. If we're sitting here having this conversation on Sunday, I'm not going to be surprised if Florida wins that.
A blowout would surprise me on either side. A blowout would surprise me.
Same with me.
So, well, Brad, thank you for joining first edition of Tailgate Talk here, buddy. Go back to learning algebra or calculus or whatever's going on over there that I put out of my head when I get rid of my TI-83 calendar or calculator. So, well, man, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, we'll do this again. Thanks, Casey.
All right, man.
All right, see you.